Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. These are turbulent times. We've been talking about Gaza. We've been talking about so many pressing issues of our time. The election, 2024. Many people are telling you that this is the most important election of our time, but every election is. And this one is of significance because there's a lot on the line. And if things are not where you think that they ought to be, your voice is your vote. Please get registered to vote and let us remind our high school seniors to vote. Reverend Jesse Jackson has been pushing for more than 50 years that when you graduate from high school, you should have a diploma in one hand and a voter registration card in the other. That's really the finishing, or should I say, part of your civic education, being a citizen. Even if you don't vote, you need to be registered to vote. You need to have that option. Too many people have lived and died, not just for Black people. Remember, at the founding of this republic, only propertied white men could vote. It's a pitiful few of us. So please get out there and vote. I'm here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Morning Stars, I see you. I see you. Please like and subscribe and click that bell so that when we come up live, you will be notified. Of course, I'm on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page and Reverend Jesse Jackson's page, and I want to be on your page. So everybody, please share this show. We're going to have quite the cast with us today, a wonderful array of guests who are going to give us a lot of different perspectives on a tragedy that is now beginning to gain traction in corporate media. Dexter Reed, a young man, was stopped for a traffic violation. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt. He was shot 96 times by the Chicago police in 41 seconds. Many of us have seen, or more and more of us are seeing the body cam footage, and it is very disturbing. It's very disturbing. And we want to know what your thoughts are, particularly you in Minneapolis, St. Paul, given what you mean to this freedom movement as we look at George Floyd. It's about this, almost at this time of the year, maybe in a couple of months, we went through this, and it seems that we go through this over and over and over again. We're going to have Attorney G. Flint Taylor, who was Fred Hampton's lawyer. He still acts on behalf of his estate even today. Regina Brent from the Unity Partnership. She meets with top law enforcement executives from all around the country. In fact, they're meeting right now, and she'll be with us within the time frame of this show, and so many others who want to weigh in. We have got Kofi Ademola from Good Kids Mad City. He's a tremendous activist here in Chicago, and you should know him all around the country. But we're going to start things off with this tremendous public servant, the head of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers, Lieutenant Charles Wilson. Indeed, you are, I have to say it, you have been working with one of my dearest friends from college, Sonia Wiggins Pruitt. I have to call her name because, boy, she makes me smile. We had a great time at Howard University. That's my girl. She used to be the head of the organization as well. And so when I was looking for someone to talk to about this, because I know of your organization, I know of the great work that you do, she said, the head of our organization now is Lieutenant Charles Wilson. And I know that once he sees this footage, he'll be able to explain to you what you are seeing. And we're welcoming Dwight McKee to the show. When he gets on camera, we will bring him there, senior advisor to the Cornel West campaign. Indeed, he announced that he has a running mate today. He announced it on the Tavis Smiley show, sending so much love to Cornel West today. Lieutenant Charles Wilson, what is your background in policing, first of all?
I started on the job in 1971 on my birthday.
Oh, my happy birthday.
There's nothing in the profession I haven't done. I've done patrol, I've done traffic, I've worked narcotics, I've worked internal affairs, I've been a police chief twice. I retired in 2016 after 45 years. My last 23 years, I was on a campus police department in Rhode Island. My first 21 and a half, I was in Ohio. I've been involved with the national body since 2002. I was elected chair the first time in 2008. Your fault, my fault, nobody's fault. They put me back in October of last year for another 2 years. So we'll see how that works.
Well, I mean, what does your organization do?
Nablio is first off, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are a organization of men and women of color who work in the criminal justice profession. We are very, very community centric. We are very much involved with trying to build better bonds and relationships between law enforcement and the community, and particularly in communities of color. We take a very strong concept against police brutality and a very, very hard focus on police accountability.
Having said that, what did we see in this tape with Dexter Reed? This young man was pulled over because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And now 96 shots and 41 seconds later, he's dead. What did you see with that body cam footage?
I see problems.
Okay.
I see problems with this whole issue. The first thing that I looked at is if the stop was indeed for a seatbelt violation, what was a plainclothes unit doing making the traffic stop? Okay. Traffic stops like that are typically conducted by uniformed officers in a regular uniform patrol car. My next question was, why did it take 5 officers to conduct a traffic stop for what they're saying was an extremely minor violation? The next question I had was, how is they actually determined that he did not have a seatbelt on? Looking at the videos, I'm looking at the car and the windows are seriously tinted. Me with 45 years of experience on the street, I'd have had a real problem trying to see into that car and say, hey, buddy, your seatbelt's not working. Okay? I had a question or concern about if the stop was for a minor traffic violation, what caused the officers to approach the vehicle with their weapons drawn? Okay. There is some reporting apparently that Mr. Reed fired the first shot.
Mhm.
If it was in fact the case, then I would tell you, yes, the officers were entitled or had the right to defend themselves. Okay. But my question then becomes, what determined that they needed to fire almost 100 rounds? Now, I could see the extra rounds if you got 5 people in the car firing back. Okay? So you want the extra firepower in a situation like that. But you got one person, supposedly 1 round fired. So what you're talking about with 100 rounds is you're talking some serious overkill. Next question I would have is, If he in fact fired on the officers, did they find the gun? Was it in the car? Was it on his person? Okay. Overall, Santita, what I'm going to say to you is based on my experience and the issues that I have been either reviewing over 45 years as a law enforcement officer or been involved with as a law enforcement officer. This There's too many questions regarding their actions to justify what they did.
Does it also give you cause to pause that it was in a residential neighborhood? I mean, these were.
It doesn't matter from the standpoint of the number of rounds being fired. Yes, okay. They should have taken that should have been a consideration. Okay, that should have been also a consideration from what I'm understanding. After he was on the ground and handcuffed, he got shot again. Okay, I got problems with that.
Why?
I got a serious problem with that.
Why?
He's not a threat to you anymore. He's down. He's cuffed. He obviously ain't got a gun in his hand. Why are you firing at him? I have a problem with that.
What was happening? Do you suspect amongst the officers? I mean, because it's 5 of them, and they're all shooting at one guy.
That's a situation I really can't explain to you.
I mean, no one said, hey, wait, hold up. No one did any of that.
And that's among the problems and questions that have to be answered. Why did everybody, because with 100 rounds being fired, at least 2 of those officers reloaded at least twice. At least twice. Okay? Looking at the weapons that it appears were their duty guns, those guns carry magazines with minimum of 15 rounds. Okay? So reloading twice gives you 30. And there had to be at least 2 officers that reloaded twice. At least. For there to be 100 rounds fired.
What will happen next? I mean, what kind of investigation? Who will do the investigating? What will they be looking for?
Chicago, from my understanding, and here again, I'm not familiar with their overall disciplinary process. There'll be an IAD investigation, Internal Affairs. There will be a Police Accountability Office investigation, CAPA. I would take it for granted that the district attorney is going to get involved in that investigation, because if they do decide, your fault, my fault, nobody's fault, that the officers were culpable, there will be charges filed. So it's very reasonable to believe that the district attorney is going to have investigators from his office involved. I have not heard anything one way or the other as far as a statement from police administration there yet.
Mm-hmm.
The one link that I did see regarding the community protests, while I understand and empathize with that, I cannot agree with the idea of being, uh, you know, trying to force your way into the a police station or anything like that, because that's only going to create a problem for you. Okay.
Mhm. What would you suggest that they do? What should be
Well,
the
the
community?
first
How
thing
do
I
you
would
want to,
tell people is when you get stopped by the police, okay, and we know that folks who look like us are going to get stopped, okay. You need to make sure that you uh, keep yourself aware of the situation and conduct yourself in such a way that you're able to effectively negotiate that encounter so that you can walk away and not be injured or have an adverse impact. Okay. Uh, Napoleon does talks to people about that under the guise of what to do when stopped by the police. Every one of our 20 some odd chapters does that program in the community.
no, but it seems that when you comply, you die. It's almost as if there's nothing you can do that's right, Lieutenant Wilson. I,
It's a hard task. It's a hard task.
would community policing help? I mean, when the community knows you,
When it's done right, yes. When it's done right. Community policing, the key word in that concept is community. Okay. You have to have officers involved who um, recognize that the people they are interacting with are people that they are there to serve, not to uh, not to look at as being uh, people are that have to be addressed from the perspective of being a jackbooted warrior. What the community deserves is guardians, not warriors. And
what's the difference?
unfortunately,
The
our,
difference being,
our training process traditionally put out warriors, not guardians.
well, I mean, here we are again, and we are in on AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, where we had George Floyd just a few short years ago. What do you want the audience to know?
What I would say to people is not every police officer responds to you the way these officers did. Okay. There are good cops. Okay. There's a bunch of good cops out there on the streets. And a lot of them look like me. A lot of them don't look like me. But our overall focus for those of us who truly want to do the work of providing safety and security for the communities we serve is making sure that there is a direct and distinct line of respect from both sides.
I don't know what to say. I'd like to get, if you don't mind, a couple of people to respond to what they've heard from you before you go, Lieutenant Wilson, if you don't
Not a
mind.
problem. Not a problem.
Kofi Ademola from Good Kids Mad City. Help me out. What have you heard from Lieutenant Wilson? I mean, this is one of our Black advocacy groups, the National Association of Black law enforcement officers, this is, I mean, they spend a lot of time talking to us. I've known of them quite some time. As I shared with you off air, one of my dear friends from college was the former head of this group, and this is how I've gotten to know you. Um, and I've grown up with a lot of police officers too. Some of them were spying on us, and then what would end up happening is they become our allies, Lieutenant Wilson, because well, I mean, they got to know us and they got to understand that we were not trying to be at odds. We were not trying to root out the police, but bad policing. Kofi, what is your response?
Hey everyone, I'm sorry. Do you mind being more specific? What's my
Sure.
response to what in
I mean, what
particular?
is your response to what he is, his reaction to the Dexter Reed shooting? And then, because I want to go around and ask everyone the reaction to the shooting. But what did you hear from Lieutenant Wilson?
Sure. So, just want to state a few facts as he named. He's not that familiar with the particulars here in
Mhm.
Chicago. So Chicago probably has the most police reforms in the entire nation. From 1974 with uh, the pulling over of Ralph Metcalf, who was a politician at the time, who ended up mentoring Harold Washington. He was illegally stopped and racially profiled, and he got wind of a child being killed by the police. So they created the Office of Professional Standards, along with the Black patrolmen from the city of Chicago in the 70s. So that was the first sort of police reform that happened. You go back before then, we want to talk about 100 shots. Well, the last time it was 100 shots fired in Chicago by the police is when they murdered Chairman Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers, as well as Mark Clark, right? So, um, that was 100 shots in a cover up. The state's attorney at the time was in cahoots with Daley Senior, in cahoots with the FBI through
Hmm.
COINTELPRO. So that was an assassination because Fred Hampton and Mark Clark and the other residents were drugged by an FBI informant, the infiltrator,
Hmm.
before their house was shot up over 100 times. And then after that, they tried to criminalize him
Hmm.
because one or two people were able to get a few shots back in self-defense. But needless to say, um, with all the reforms happening, so we have a consent decree in Chicago since about 2017. We've had the Department of Justice come here and do an investigation into the Chicago Police Department, which found that Chicago has some of the highest rates of racial profiling, um, disproportionate ticketing of and traffic stops of Black people, as well as plenty of police killings. When Officer Van Dyke was convicted for the murder of Laquan McDonald after shooting him 16 times, which, by the way, he only ended up serving 2 years in prison. He's out, a free man right now, living his best life. But there hadn't been a prosecution of an officer in 30 years prior to that, right? So we've had 30 years of consistent killing by the Chicago Police Department without any justice for the families that have been directly impacted by that. So you fast forward now, right now we have a consent decree, we have a civilian police board, we have a civilian oversight that he mentioned through COPA, um, and now we have what are called district councils, people from the community who are democratically elected for police accountability and oversight. So we have all of these bodies that are kind of in place now. But if you peel back the onion, you'll see that the consent decree has only 66% in compliance, meaning that 94% of what has been recommended by the consent decree that's supposed to be enforced, the Chicago Police Department is not doing. You want to talk about training? We hear that all the time. Oh, they just need better training. Well, sadly, the first cop academy was built here, despite people protesting. It was built in West Garfield, so they have a specific training center, specifically to train their officers, right? So they get plenty of training, whatever the up to date training is. So we have to say, okay, well, maybe it's not just the training. I personally went to the public hearing and spoke to Superintendent Snelling personally, looked him in his eye, and told him the problems that that the department has, specifically where those 5 officers come from out of the 11th district on the west side of Chicago. They are notorious for pulling black people over. In fact, they have the most traffic stops in all of Chicago. And of course, more than 80% of those people that are pulled over are black people. So it is no surprise, right? And then that particular tactical unit that assassinated Dexter Reed in cold blood, they have a history of wrongful stops, unconstitutional stops. So he was not pulled over because they saw him without a seatbelt. They cut him off like they were some carjackers. They didn't come up behind his car, turn on their lights. They were in an unmarked vehicle. They were wearing plain clothes and a hoodie. They literally drove in front of him, cut his car off, hopped out of their cars with their guns pointing, yelling, cursing profanities and instructions, not once announcing that they were police officers. And they did not look like police officers.
Hold on one moment, which goes to your point,
Mhm.
Lieutenant Wilson, that they were in plain clothes. And they're, yes?
I have to agree with basically with what he's indicating at this stage. The problem with that traffic stop, okay, is the way they started it from the very beginning. Okay, you got a plain clothes unit doing misdemeanor Mickey Mouse traffic violation stops. They get out of the car with weapons drawn. They don't seem to ID themselves as law enforcement officers. So if I'm a young black man sitting in the car by myself, yeah, I'm going to be scared like all hell. I might fire on you if I had a weapon. And if you didn't give me some better excuses not to. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The problem that you have there, and if he's correct in saying that this particular plainclothes unit has had issues previously, then the problem with that is the police administration. If they know that they have problems with these particular officers, they should have gotten them off the streets. Period. No questions asked, no argument taken.
Dwight McKee, you knew Fred Hampton, and in fact, you and other members of Operation Breadbasket went out looking for Bobby Rush when he was the most wanted man in America. In the hours after Fred Hampton and Mark Clark had been murdered. And indeed, Kofi, because we were alive at the time, I was about 5. But when that happened, and we're going to have G. Flint Taylor, Fred Hampton's lawyer, on shortly. The corporate media reported it as a shootout.
Yeah.
So they did not report it as, that this was something that happened between Mark Clark and Fred Hampton. It was only when G. Flint Taylor went to the apartment the next day that he saw that all of the bullet holes went in. There were none that went out. Dwight McKee, why don't you respond to what you've been hearing?
Well, it's the closest thing to the assassination I've seen since Fred. It looks to be. A couple of issues that I have with it. One is, how did they know that he didn't have a seatbelt on
There you
if the
go.
car was tinted? The windows were tinted. Secondly, if the gun was on the seat, which it would have had to have been, since he didn't reach down for the gun, it was instant. How could they see the seatbelt and not see the gun? It's a very, very, very tricky situation to me. In that, as you said, officer, both of y'all have said, first thing, it was a traffic stop without a traffic light. They ambushed him. The car, when you saw it, was their car had cut him off and parked in front of his car. and they jumped out in such a way as they had criminalized him before they even knew who he was. The issue to me, the way they talked to him, is they wasn't looking for him to comply. They were looking for him to grovel.
Yeah.
And the way the white woman policeman talked to him, she should be arrested just for her attitude. She started cussing at him and calling him names with a gun drawn. And any citizen, any basic private citizen who have fundamental rights would have been terrified by five people in your neighborhood who you've never seen before jumping out in an unmarked car, not identifying themselves, putting guns to your head, and telling you to put your pull your window down, roll your window down, and get out of the car
Mhm.
or do what I tell you to do. It seemed to me that this is a little deeper than just a alleged traffic stop.
Yeah.
It seemed to me that he was already targeted and they were looking for a pretext, either to arrest him or to shoot him, because nothing about this stop makes any sense.
Thank you.
I, I've never seen five officers for a traffic stop in a unmarked car without uniforms. I've never seen a tactical force. This was almost a goon squad, it seemed to me. And so I think that this should be not treated like a accidental or legitimate shooting. I think that they should investigate this as a criminal enterprise. That this is just a little deeper than just an ordinary traffic stop that went bad. This seemed to have much more broad implications than that. And they seem to have a history of having done this to other people. Something is rotten in Denmark.
Mm. Pastor Marshall Hatch.
Yes, I mean, the white is on it, obviously, and I'm very familiar with that neighborhood. It is absolutely crawling with police because the neighborhood itself, I pastor in West Garfield Park, just happen to be very familiar with where this happened at. It's crawling with suburban and out of state people copying drugs. So it's a neighborhood that's dumped on by people who come from outside to buy drugs. That is the basic tenet of that neighborhood. So you have these kind of jump out squads, and I think the white's point is well taken. Some of them themselves are criminal enterprises, supplementing their salaries and kind of, I don't know anything about these police, but I know that this stop made no sense at all. And for a seatbelt, and something else is happening there, and a real investigation is going to be charged. I have to get to the bottom of the way policing is conducted in the community, what these police were on in particular. Uh, what we did not see, the tape that it was not released, we saw the car shot up. And then the next sort of sequence, the guy's on the ground. How did he get on the ground? The witnesses say he got out of the car with his hands up. And that's how he ends up getting shot over and over again, laying on the ground. So he got out of the car to surrender. Now, remember, all of this is taking place apparently in less than a minute. I mean, saying 41 seconds, 96 shots. So this individual, Mr. Reed, he doesn't have a lot of time to react. He's cut off. He's trapped. Plainclothes officers, not necessarily identifying himself. His father was a security guard. I mean, obviously he has a weapon. A lot of people are driving around with weapons in the neighborhood for their personal protection. So he's obviously like caught between a rock and a hard place when these police ride up on him. He's got to try to figure out. He know he's got a gun charge already, which is it's interesting to me because all I ever hear is right wingers around the country saying they have a right to carry guns, as if black people don't have Second Amendment rights. Apparently, I mean that's almost like the way it is approached. Like he's got to be a bad guy if he has a gun. That's not necessarily true. And so it is something rotten in Denmark. The whole piece doesn't make any sense. And of course, 96 shots is absolutely ridiculous.
Lieutenant Wilson,
Yes.
what do you say how do you prepare people, citizens, young people for this? We tell them to comply. When they comply, they die. I mean, it's just, you have people rolling up on you in a neighborhood, which, Pastor Ash said is a neighborhood that is crawling with police officers because, this is a place where drugs are dropped and sold. And then you have people coming in from all over to get the drugs from there. It just, really? I mean, how do you prepare? Was there anything what could Dexter have done to have saved his life? It doesn't look like there was any. He had no chance.
I'm going to be very blunt with you. I don't have a clue what to tell you. This situation that we're talking about today, quite frankly, makes no sense whatsoever. It should not have happened. The officers involved, from my personal opinion, this is not the opinion of my organization.
Mm-hmm.
My personal opinion, they need to be charged.
Charged with what?
At the very least, manslaughter charges. At the very least. Okay. And I recognize that some of my counterparts will disagree with that. You cannot justify something like this by saying we stopped him because he didn't have his seatbelt on. Quite frankly, that's a bunch of bull. Okay, that's a bunch of bull, and I readily apologize to you if it sounds a little off. Okay, but these are the kind of situations that really tick me off as a police officer, because it makes every law enforcement officer that I'm familiar with look bad. Okay, this is not the kind of policing that me and my membership do. We recognize that everyone we come in contact with has a right to be shown respect and dignity. Period. No questions asked, no arguments taken. And that's what we talk to our counterparts about. That's what we train. I'm in Maryland right now, and next week we're going to be doing 2 16-hour sessions of de-escalation training. It's simply and solely an issue of trying to make officers more aware of how to properly and adequately interact with people in the community, and specifically people in communities of color.
Kofi, what are you hearing?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. So one thing I wanted to make clear were our demands. And when I say we, I mean community-based organizations,
Mm-hmm.
the family. I'm in direct contact and communication with Dexter's family.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some things that they want to see as well. So first and foremost, like I named earlier, the 11th district has the most racial profiling in all of Chicago. So like the Reverend name, West Garfield, Lawndale, etc. So we need to completely eliminate um, traffic stops and violations by those officers. We need another body in place that is unarmed um, to do traffic interactions. Period. Because anytime something like this can happen, it's going to happen more often than not when you have a high number of racial profiling and folks being pulled over for being black. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this tactical unit needs to be disbanded. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are so many other instances that go reported, that go unreported, with traffic chases. A young child, a little girl, was killed because a tactical unit was pursuing somebody and ended up, accidentally taking her life, but it was still a tragedy nonetheless. So we want to see a disbandment of these tactical units. Period. Um, and then we want to see these 5 officers fired. So we're hearing that Superintendent Snelling has recommended to COPA that 4 out of the 5 officers be fired while the investigation is happening. So hopefully COPA will follow through. Hopefully uh, the police board, like I said, Chicago has the most reform in the entire country, and yet we still see these incidents happening. So folks like myself we're done with the rhetoric around better training or reforms, accountability.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some radical transformation. We can't continue to live like this. Like I said, we we've seen decades upon decades of similar incidents happening, and all the reforms in the world isn't slowing it down. So there has to be something more drastic to happen. But in the immediacy, we want to see these 5 officers fired and held accountable. We want to see the traffic stops in, and we want to see the tactical unit disband. So last night, after we had a press conference in front of the 11th district, there was a white heckler there trying to be disruptive. We didn't engage,
What
but
did he say? What did the heckler say?
he just kept saying, Josh, not, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about Joshua Bill, another
Mm-hmm.
brother killed by the
Yeah.
police. He just kept saying, repeating over and over that, Dexter shot a cop, right? Um, and, he got chanted down, he got quieted out, but then he tried to get antagonistic with the family. Some other people stepped in, but things got chaotic. Long story short, Dexter's younger brother, Julius, ends up getting badly arrested. Like I witnessed 20 cops storm him. He maybe weighs 100 pounds soaking wet. They slam this young brother to the ground. 7 cops are pinning him down, and now they put some trumped up charges like inciting, resisting arrest, etc. So now we have to deal with making sure he gets legal representation, he gets support. He's already dealing with the trauma of his older brother being murdered, and now he has to be incarcerated. And the reason why I thought about Joshua Bill is because when he was murdered, they arrested his brother Michael Bill in a very similar situation, and we ended up fortunately getting him out right before Christmas so he can be with his family. So my point being is there's still a lot of ways to go. It's a good thing that a lot of people are questioning, the stop, making the point that how did they see through a tenant window? The fact that the stop was unconstitutional. That's what the defense lawyers are saying. So this will be a case that a lot of eyes across the country will have on it, but it's bigger than Dexter. But in the moment, we're about supporting and taking care of his family, making sure that they have, you know, a way to deal with their trauma, financial support, therapy, whatever resources we can get them so that their mental health and their well-being can be taken care of. Because we've been in the streets with Ronald Johnson's mother, He was killed literally 2 weeks after Laquan McDonald. We've been in the streets with Rakia Boyd's family. She was murdered back in 2012. The reason why folks say her name is because of her murder. She never got justice. It's so many families that we work with. Pierre Loray, he was killed by the 11th district as well. Officer Sean Hicks got promoted to detective. He was killed back in 2016. His angel day anniversary is tomorrow. So we're going to be with his family tomorrow as they mourn the loss of their 16-year-old child who was killed by CPD. So this stuff is reverberating through our communities because so many families are being impacted by it. And as a person that comes through from a background of violence prevention, restorative justice, transformative justice, working directly with young people who are involved with the streets, involved with intercommunal violence, etc. We don't allow people to conflate the things or pit them against each other. We care about both. We want to stop the violence in the streets, and we want to stop, our young people going to prisons and jails, and we want to stop young Black men and women being killed by the police.
Well, this resonated with you, Lieutenant Wilson. Why?
I'm sorry?
This resonated with you. I saw you nodding your head in agreement.
Well, it's resonating with me because this is, again, this is not the type of policing that I have been promoting for over 40 some odd years. This whole incident makes no realistic sense to me because it's not something that should have been done. There's just no common sense to what happened here. And unfortunately, unless it's properly investigated and people are adequately held accountable for what they did, it's going to be business as usual.
Well, you know what? I think it makes sense, but I did math in college, and the equal sign yields what it yields, right?
Yeah.
It's just that what we put into the front of the equation, when we start adding all these elements, we might not like what we see.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of these police officers who are really a criminal element. Not all, but some.
Yeah.
And that's what this, for people who really understand the streets and how things go, that's what you see, because that's when it makes sense. It doesn't make sense when you're behaving lawfully, but when you're behaving lawlessly, it makes sense. It's just we know now, 96 shots later, 41 seconds, you have someone else who is dead. And I've got about 3 minutes here. What do you want us to know, Lieutenant Wilson?
What I would say first and foremost on behalf of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers, my prayers and condolences to the Reed family. There is no one, Black, white, or indifferent, who should have had to go through this type of trauma. I also would have to extend my wishes to the officer who was injured and wish him a speedy recovery. And that with the concept and personal belief that they're going to find his injuries were due to friendly fire. I'm going to urge the administration of the Chicago Police Department to do everything possible to resolve this issue. And if they find that the officers are liable do the right thing. Don't just fire them. Fire them, take their shield and gun away from them, and then charge them in court.
Why is that important for them to go to court? I've got 1 minute.
Why is it important?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the only way that you can get accountability. It's the only way that the community can see that the system works for everybody. Plain and simple.
And if that does not happen,
They can look for this to happen again. No questions asked, no arguments taken. They can look for it to happen again.
Lieutenant Charles Wilson, National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers, helping us to really unpack all of this. Kofi Ademola, Good Kids, Mad City. Hope you'll stay with us for the second hour. Dwight McKee, Dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project from your church, Reverend Dr. Marshall Hatch, Pastor Hatch, the Great Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church. He's also, Dwight McKee is the senior advisor to Cornel West in his presidential campaign. Please stay tuned for the second hour. We're going to continue to talk about Dexter Reed. Dexter Reed, Minneapolis, and everybody who's listening to us from around the country. Dexter Reed, young man. He was pulled over by, he was actually triangulated by plainclothes police officers. 96 shots in 41 seconds. He is now gone. How does this happen? What was going on? As you've described to us, this is a neighborhood that is crawling with people who come in from out of the city, Pastor Hatch. Because we all know that they drop the drugs in the Black and brown communities, and the white kids and everybody else comes in from every place else to buy them.
Predominantly white.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But they drop them in our community. So, Lieutenant Wilson, I want to thank you for being with us today, and I hope that you will come back under happier circumstances.
As Santita asked me anytime, I will try and be there for you.
I appreciate it. I mean, I'm glad you were able to stay for much longer than you'd anticipated, but this is a tremendous panel, and I wanted them to say something to you. But
well, I hope that my words have been received in the manner in which I meant them to be. Mm-hmm. I hope that there is a resolution to this issue that does justice, not just for Dexter Reed and his family, but for the community that we serve.
Stay tuned for the second hour as we talk about Dexter Reed. 96 shots in 41 seconds. Minneapolis, you can relate to that. I mean, George Floyd was on the ground and they kept choking him. He said, I can't breathe. Stay right here for more of the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Back in just a minute.